your mom and I had actually a discussion about whether we tell you what we think is good for you and we get you to force
Do
you
you
to
think
do
that
it.
in hindsight I did what was good for me?
To be very honest with you, I would have asked you to do something different. I wouldn't have asked you to do what you wanted to do. So did Max as well.
Okay.
And
So what would you have asked me to
I
do?
probably would have asked you to do law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why law?
And partly the reason because you.
Welcome to the Game of Impossible podcast. My name is Leon and this is my dad, Idris Jala. We are a father-son podcast where we discuss all things transformation through the lens of business, leadership, sport, as well as faith. Today, I want to talk about the topic of personality-driven businesses versus professionally-driven businesses. You know, we have seen both case studies for both sides of the coin. You know, you have worked in Shell for many years, very much a professionally-driven business where the business and as well as its culture and methodology has continued to be sustained through the ages, regardless of who is in charge.
Right.
Then on the other hand, you have examples like perhaps an Apple or even in more recent times than Tesla with Elon Musk being very much in control of share prices depending on what he tweets.
Yeah.
So I want for us to maybe explore today what are the pros and cons of both sides. You know, for us, maybe we can start talking about personality-driven businesses. I think at this stage, PEMANDU, which is the consulting firm that you had founded, but where you are also the chairman and CEO, I would say at this point in its lifespan, it still very much is kind of a personality-driven business. I think we have a very clear methodology. So in terms operationally, that is very much cascaded down to all the working teams and everybody embodies that. But you know, you're on sabbatical right now, and we still get requests from clients and ministers who request specifically for your time. And that's been kind of an interesting one to deal with because some of the projects have also been sort of contingent on you returning from sabbatical. What are your thoughts on a personality-driven business? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
Yeah. Let me begin by sticking to the point when you mentioned the person who starts the whole business, the founder, if you like. Normally, when someone begins an organization, it tends to be closely aligned to what you call personality-driven organization. The founder mentality is always driven by a person that begins the journey and starts it off. They have a very, very strong culture, an idea of a dream or a vision that they want to take it on. That's what happens. Now, the question of how long the founder mentality now transition and stay on as a personality-driven organization. Some take very long time, and some take relatively short period of time. And so let me take one example. In the case of Shell, when you referred to Shell, Shell was started off in the year 1897 by two brothers, Marcus Samuel and Samuel Samuel. They both started this. But you know, not many people remember their names, because they didn't stay very long to drive the organization to where it is. It shifted very quickly towards a professional-driven organization. So people don't even remember Marcus Samuel and the brother because they didn't stay very long in doing that. And they pivoted relatively quickly to become a professionally driven organization. So altogether, since that time when they founded Shell, and that's been 127 years. And so let me now begin by saying that's as quickly, that tells you how organization begins. They normally begin with a founder mentality, which shift to become a personality-driven organization. And sometimes they take very short time to transition to become professionally driven, some for very, very long period of time. Let me return back to the question that you raised before. What are the pros and cons? Let me begin with the advantages of a personality-driven organization. And you made mention of Tesla. Elon Musk is a larger-than-life character. You also referred to Steve Jobs in the case of Apple. These are very strong personality. Now that we know that Steve Jobs has passed on, Apple is still doing relatively well. It tells you one thing, that they've now already successfully transitioned to a completely professionally driven organization. One of the biggest pros of having a personality-driven organization, it is an organization that has very strong and aligned culture and organization on the vision and direction set, because it's set by one individual. So that is so clear, and it's so clear for the organization because the person set it, and there's no misunderstanding about what the vision is and how they're going to move forward. The other pros of a personality-driven organization is speed of decision making. Decision making are made relatively quick because it's one person that makes the decision. They tend also, the third area is they tend to be highly innovative organization. They tend to be, because the person who begins with normally begin with an innovative spirit and highly entrepreneurial spirit. They come thinking outside the box, and that person normally is the one successful organization who are personality driven. They tend to be that, and so those are some of the key elements. And also the fourth one is the brand identity is strongly aligned to the character of the individual. And so if you mention Elon Musk, you don't need to think about Tesla, the brand, but you just think about Elon Musk. The Elon Musk character is the one that it pushes the envelope on the identity of the brand called Tesla. Tesla is prepared to push beyond the boundaries, a bit nasty in parts as well, and so prepared to go and challenge status quo. And that's why even when he bought Twitter, he immediately changed to X. That tells you the character. It's the brand identity. So these are the four pros of a personality-driven organization.
Yeah, I mean, this very podcast is also at this stage, at least, it is personality-driven, and I suppose my personal leaning is that regardless of whether or not you intend for your business to remain personality-driven, because for some people, let's say you are running a personal brand, then that is your true north, to intentionally create an environment or an organization that is personality-driven and that will remain personality-driven. But even if you set out to run a professionally driven business at some point, like you mentioned, you do have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And to begin with, if you are the person with that vision, then you have to be the one that carries it. Mark Randolph, who is the former CEO, one of the former CEOs of Netflix, he said that, culture is observational. What do we see in the leaders themselves? Basically, culture should become a byproduct of the leadership or the leader. So you have to some degree, I think, start off being personality driven.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the key is then how do you start to document what makes your vision tick? And in doing that, create systems, create frameworks then for other people to adopt it. If you want to then move towards being professionally driven. I suppose in time as well, when this podcast, I don't think it will always remain just a podcast. Eventually, we will want to go into developing resources, programs, and tools for people. At that point in time, this podcast will probably grow into some form of an organization and not just a two-man show. So when that happens also, what would that look like, for us in terms of thinking about how do we essentially create a lot of other Idrises and Leons who will potentially even start to run the show as well. How has that played out for you in PEMANDU?
Yeah. When we started PEMANDU, and obviously, it began with me. That's how it all started. And when we were in government, I had a team to come over in Port Dickson. We had a discussion, what are we going to do after we finish our work in the government. And that's when I mentioned the idea, and we had a big discussion about doing it. And so, but I do believe that at some point when you start to do this, there is a point when I will have to transition out. And that is why we have made very clear our ways, our methods of doing things is clearly documented, and we train everybody to do it. What we call the 6 secrets of transformational leadership. They are copyrighted by me because I'm the founder. I'm the one who came up with these ideas. And also the 8-step methodology. And they were all my copyrights. But obviously, I allowed the firm to use it. We document it and we train everybody. So basically making sure the yin and the yang, the character of the organization, and then embraced by the entire organization. And that's
Can you
Once
explain, for those who are not
Yeah.
familiar, what do we mean by the yin and yang?
And the
in
yin
this
and the
case?
yang is the changing of the paradigm, which is the being side of it, is the six secrets. That means people who always want to make sure that they pursue the game, the impossible. Leaders who pursue the game, the impossible. Secondly, leaders who anchor on the true north. They're very clear about true north. The third one is making sure they exercise discipline of action in the things that they do. The fourth one is that they understand and embrace situational leadership. That means adjust their leadership style depending on team development. And fourthly, they are leaders who then make sure that they pursue or embrace winning coalition. That means bringing people along with them, the stakeholders, and everybody to come along on the journey. And finally, leaders who accept divine intervention. And so those are we call the six secrets of transformational leadership. So what we try to do is to make sure that everybody in the organization, in PEMANDU, embrace this, we call it being culture, this paradigm mindset. That's very important. And having now done that, we call it the yin side. The yang side is the doing side. What do you actually do? It's one thing to say
operational
side, and that's what we call the 8-step methodology. And just to be clear, the step number one that you do is to get the leadership into a workshop so that they agree the true north and the clear priorities. Step number two, having agreed that, then you run labs, get a team in the organization to come together and to look at the challenges and the vision of the organization and come with detailed plans based on the strategies to move the pieces forward. Number three, make sure that you engage the whole organization, the key stakeholders, through an open day. Conduct an open day. The fourth is when we make sure we write and document it in a roadmap, so that this roadmap shows the clear commitment of the whole organization from the top to the bottom and to middle managers to pursue the goals and to make sure that they will relentlessly work towards achieving that. Number five is to cascade all of those goals throughout the organization in the form of key performance indicators. And number six, implementation. This is doing it relentlessly every day, every week, every month, every year. And number two, monitor it continuously. What we mean by every week, we expect people to be able to have a dashboard to check what is going well and what's not doing well and make corrective actions. Corrective action is about solving problem. That's when a routine solving problems are there. And that is, now number seven is to make sure every year, before you announce your results, you must validate the results. That means audit the results so that the results are real. They are not fake. And number eight, do a performance appraisal of the results so far and the performance of the individuals involved and provide rewards to those who are delivered it, and also implement consequence management and training for those who are not, so that you can then improve. That's what we call the 8-step process. And so if you do the doing, plus embrace the being, the perspectives that I talked about before, we believe this 8-step plus the 6 secrets are the one that will propel an organization to become very professionally driven, because it's no longer driven by an individual. We have a culture, we had a method how to do it, and everybody knows how to do it. It's no longer dependent on me. So we started this private firm since 2017. You know, over the years in consultancy, Leon, there is an attrition rate of about 30% per year. You would say, you can calculate within 3 years, we have almost changed out of people in the organization. Despite that, I noticed that people still embrace the doing and the being in the way we describe, because we have method, we have institutionalized the methodology, so everybody knows it. Even the young people who join us, they embrace it relatively quickly. But it will be time for us to do that. Part of my taking the sabbatical is already putting a small handbrake to this, so that I will not have a test as regards whether the team is prepared to run without me. So this one whole year is basically a test to you and Ida and Rizwan and the team below, and we'll see whether how much you are being able to run the business without me. So of course, when I come back on 25th of February, when I do, it will be depending on how much progress you guys have made. If you made tremendous progress, You don't need me, and then I won't be here. But if you made some progress, you still need me in some form, then my role will be adjusted depending on that. Then there will be a time that I will become completely redundant.
What would you say would be your key measures of deciding when to step in, when to pull back? I mean, I'm just thinking of, I referenced Netflix earlier. Netflix story was interesting because you have two co-founders, Mark Randolph and Reed Hastings. And so one of them, Reed Hastings, being the majority stakeholder and also perhaps being the more kind of seasoned veteran in the kind of business world and as an investor as well, he naturally assumed then the chairman role, whereas Mark Randolph assumed the CEO role. And that went on for a while. But then there was a time where they felt that they were not exactly on the path to achieving their true north.
Right.
And so at that point, Reed Hastings then sits his friend down and says, hey, here are some of our results. Here's the shape of things. Essentially, I would like to come in as CEO, and I think you should step down as COO. So he made a decision to take back the reins and to steer the ship. And that proved to be very good for the business. And even Mark Randolph goes on to say that that was actually the best decision we made. It was very difficult at the time for me to relinquish the role, but it was for the betterment of the company. And he ultimately said, I had to ask myself then if our true north was profitability of the business as well as growing this to become a truly innovative service and product, then actually me stepping down as CEO would be the thing to do. Obviously, if the true north was about me becoming the best CEO, then it would be the other way. But that was not the true north that they had agreed on. So in their case, I think the measure or the metric being observed to decide when to step in was profitability. What would you say would be the things that you are thinking about when deciding what the shape of your role would be?
I would say there are four things. Two of them are financial related. The other two are non-financial, which are people related. Let me define what they are. The first one is profitability, net income after tax. So if the company has done relatively well in terms of net income after tax, you can tick the box there. The other one is revenue growth. You can make very good net income after tax, but you don't see clear revenue growth. That means it's going to stay stagnant. So I want to see revenue growth as another measure. Those are the two financial measures. The other two, there's nothing to do with financial measures. They are people related. Number one is to check whether clients talk positively about our engagements. So I want to check with the clients that we've engaged during the period I'm away, whether they're really positive about the quality of our work. They said it's fantastic. We really love the way in which they. So that is a key. So that's the people, which are the clients' views and perspective. And the third or the fourth one, very importantly, is the views of the people within the organization, about the organization itself, how it is led, about the leaders, and that is a very important view. So when you get those four parameters together, the two of them are financial measures and the other people-related measures, then I think you can safely say that on the basis of tick in all the boxes here, that is a very good time to make a move out and say, well, they don't really need me because they can really now do it without you.
My personal take on where PEMANDU is right now is that I think in terms of operationally and even in terms of just looking at financial performance, I think we're doing very well. Operationally as well, we're a much younger firm now, so we have so many new joiners, we have so many young consultants, but they're all equally able to hold their own in so many of the engagements, be it locally or internationally with businesses as well as governments as well. So operationally, I think we have definitely distilled your methodology into a science that everyone is able to replicate. I feel in terms of the being side, so you talk about the yin, that is still in the area of what I would call an art. And I don't think that as an organization, save for perhaps the old guard in the firm, I don't think we are necessarily at a stage yet where everyone has necessarily captured or even embraced the art of that. Myself included. I mean,
Yeah.
you and I, we have slightly different takes on how to lead. So even for me, this is also kind of a journey of embodying more of that sort of PEMANDU spirit as far as the being goes. We had a meeting with somebody, and this person, they said, you know, your methodology is really interesting and really quite fascinating. But perhaps something that you guys have not quite articulated yet is this secret sauce that you had. She described it as a secret sauce that underpins the methodology. And she said, I also can't quite put a finger on it. And I don't think you guys have been able to articulate it yet, but there is a secret sauce. And so I've been thinking about that quite a bit, actually, because obviously people are seeing it. It's enough. We have it enough for it to be visible to people. But I don't think we have quite captured, okay, now what is it? How do we define it? And now how do we create now, similar to how you have your 8 steps in an operational sense, how do we now create almost like a methodology for now adopting this thing? And also being able to define it properly, because I think unless we are able to define it, it will be quite difficult to teach it. And that's something that I think is especially important to think about now, where hybrid work is a lot more of the modus operandi. You know, in a kind of traditional on-site business model, then it's easier. You don't necessarily have to define what your culture, what your being is, because just by virtue of proximity to your teams, then that you're constantly emanating that, and then that is then being replicated within your teams. But I think as you start to play a more kind of remote or adopt a more remote way of working, I think there is a need to be able to be a little more intentional in defining those things. We have the 6 secrets, but how do we then adopt the 6 secrets? What do you think we can do as organizations to be able to do that and be more intentional about culture?
The answer to the question is, what is secret sauce? The answer is plainly simple. It is the secrets that we talk about. We talk about the 6 secrets. That's why we call it secret, because it is a secret. You have to discover it, and it is very elusive. But there are 6 of them, the secrets. That really is a secret sauce.
Yeah, and by the way, we have an episode on each of these 6 secrets. It's our first 6 episodes, actually, of this podcast.
If you take a look at the 6 secrets, and if you ask me and force me, pin me to the wall, Leon, and ask of the 6th one, which one is really the mandatory aspect of the secret sauce that your friend talked about? It's called the game impossible. If you don't do that part of it, you forget it. And I tell you why. If you go down and do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the doing side, all of that you tick the box. But if you begin with simply saying, you're setting up an ordinary goal. The target is very ordinary. You're not chasing the game, the impossible. What it means is everything down there is mediocrity. After you've done step 1 to step 8, they're all mediocrity because you're not changing status quo. If you put the game, the impossible, by definition, we begin by saying the target's impossible to achieve based on your current way of doing it. You have to force yourself to discover new ways how to do it. And so the starting point is the key. I call it the inflection point of departure. And that's the secret sauce. And I really believe how we do it in an organization is that we must make sure that every time we meet a client, our team begin with that discussion and really challenge them to make sure that the target is impossible to achieve based on the current way of doing it. I can tell you, I would say more than 60% of our team succumb to what the client say is their target. And it's a realistic target, they put realistic target, and our guy said, okay, let's get on with that. That's good enough to begin with. That's already consigning the whole journey towards a journey of mediocrity. And so our team must really
So
push
in this case, I want to ask then,
Yeah.
what would be more important then? Because we say that profitability is one of the key metrics that we look at as a true north for our business. Now, by that same token, if I were to put on the hat of maybe some of
Yeah.
the team members that might be more willing to just listen to what the
Succumb to
client
the
wants and
client.
succumb to the client's goals, even if they're quite achievable goals. From a profitability standpoint, you could argue then wouldn't that make more sense? Because okay, well, the client actually all the client wants is X. We can definitely deliver X.
Yeah.
They've not asked for Y, so by delivering X, I still get paid a certain amount with less resource, arguably. So profitability-wise, it makes more sense for business. How do we navigate or walk the
Navigate.
tension between profitability, but then also actually value and wanting to really drive things and innovate?
Yeah. The way I see that it's not contradictory. To illustrate the point is this: if I see a client and I will just do what the client wants to do, which is realistic target, and do exactly what we were discussing in that discussion, we'll implement, I will get a tick in the box. They'll probably say, very good, we're very happy with you. But if I now go beyond that and they say, well, let me begin with asking you the question, can we put a target, an Olympics target, that you never dreamt of in the organization to achieve? And if in 6 weeks we run the labs, it becomes very clear, there's clear roadmap for them to achieve it. You don't just get a satisfaction from the client, but you get a wow. This is the wow I'm looking for. I want people to say, wow, this is, for the life of, I've never thought that my team will be able to achieve such levels of performance. Now I realize when we run the labs with the guys from your team, really pushing the envelope here, I can see that we're really moving there. So they will give us the profits, they will give us a satisfaction, client satisfaction that's on the wow, on the pedestal. That's what I really want. Because to me, if you want to be outstanding as a consulting firm, you must bring a unique value proposition and that we bring to the client, and that everybody that engages with us, they will be able to say, I can see it. And that's why I see, what is it, the unique value proposition? There's three words: big, fast, result. And that's the whole thing behind it. So the client say, wow, you help to achieve big results. It's not just a process thing. So I believe that this part of it is the paradigm change between our own team. It needs to become so infectious that it will transfer to the client, and that the result or engagement with the client will be wow. This is fantastic. That's how I think about it. It's not one or the other. So if you get good client profitability because they pay us our fees, but on the top of that, the satisfaction is on the wow, on the pedestal.
I think the way that PEMANDU operates, and very much even the way that the church that I work for operates, HTBB, I would say we are still in a kind of startup phase. And the startup phase is exciting because we often, sometimes within the management, we joke that we call it the cowboy way of operating.
Just do.
We're able to just do, we're able to even to experiment. And sometimes certain things fail, but then the important thing is that we're able to fail fast and refine as we go. And the quicker we're able to do that, actually, the quicker we're able to innovate and get on the right track eventually.
Right.
But I do wonder, at this stage, I think that's a great way to go. And that's also what sets us apart from other consulting firms, because we are less bureaucratic, we can make decisions quickly and sometimes make some pretty left field decisions, i.e. in the past, I think we have talked about this in previous episodes, but in the past offering a no cure, no pay solution, which I think for a lot of bigger firms would be a complete nightmare, actually. So us being small allows us the flexibility and freedom to do that, to showcase our secret sauce of being this kind of maverick within the industry. But I do wonder, if and when the organization does grow and becomes increasingly corporate, how do we maintain that secret sauce in a larger scale organization?
I think the
multiple
key here,
offices.
There are a few elements to how to pivot to become a professionally driven organization, as you describe it. First one is that you must make sure there is distributed leadership. rather than one person leading it at the helm. And that means everybody within the team holds part of the decision making, and so that it is really clear that it's not contingent on one person and one person alone. So I call that distributed leadership. The second aspect is you institutionalize the process. And that I think we've done really well. I think in our case, we're ticking the box, maybe 5 ticks in the process itself. It's very clear how we do it. The third one is succession planning. And without doubt, if you don't have succession planning, you don't have somebody that takes over the person that runs it. And that's why we are trying very hard to go and do that. The challenge, obviously, is some of our best people, at some point they leave as well, because consultancy is not a cup of tea for everybody. At some point, there's a time in their life they want to take a sedentary job rather than the job that is, you're continuously on a jet flying to another country to do work. And the fourth one is the cultural shift from cultivating a culture that values collaboration. That means not just one person, the cultural shift to you collaborate, there's teamwork, a lot more forged within the management team, for example. So these are some of the 4 elements that I believe will help a company transition from being personality-driven to professionally driven.
Now, maybe to close on a more personal level, as a parent, I'm a dad myself of 2 kids. How have you? How has this also played out as a parent in terms of knowing when to direct as a dad, and then when to eventually sort of step back and let your children make decisions for themselves?
Yeah, it's as you mentioned before, Leon, this kind of thing, it's more an art. There's no real science to how to go and do it, because you look at your child and to see whether telling them, directing them, to what extent do you begin to pull out? And so to me, the answer lies very squarely in situational leadership. When I see you and Max and your mom as well, we both looked at you and Max. At the time when you're incompetent, a lot of our language is no and don't. When you are totally incompetent, you don't know how to cook, you don't know how to use the kitchen, and you're still crawling. Obviously, we don't allow you to go and empower you to go to the kitchen and do what you please. But once you begin to gain competency in the stuff that you do, it's through trial and error. We let you do it, you get out to do it. I remember when you first went out for I think it was camp in Sri Lanka. And you guys went for a camp.
We went rafting. Water rafting.
And you were still young then. And your
like
mom
10
and
or
I.
11. Actually, now if I think back, I would be crapping my pants to think of Isla as a 10-year-old or 11-year-old going whitewater rafting.
Yeah. Which is why Mommy and I, we had to look at it and said, do we allow you to go? Yes or no? This is like I said, it's not a science, it's an art. We look at you, I think he can. I think it's possible.
Some of these were crocodile-infested waters as well. And our teachers purposely kind of threw us overboard into the water,
And luckily we didn't know that.
Stories I've saved for now.
I think if we knew that, we probably might have said, no, you don't go.
That's exactly why I didn't tell you, because I was thinking there's going to be a lot more of these field trips. I don't want to be excluded.
So back to the point, the moral of the story is that we had to look at your competency level. Can you cope with the environment that you're thrusted, that you're alone without us overseeing and looking at you? So the more you do that, the more you say, you come back, oh, he's good, right? No harm, nothing happened, no mishap, The next time round, then you want to do something a little bit more extra in terms of the risk, then we become more and more confident that you can take it on. And as you go through life. So this idea of being in the beginning directive at the start of the journey because of the level of competency, and then through the period when you're going through a lot of trials, etc., we show empathy to you do. But once you become competent, and then we're learning to empower, learning to let go, let you make your own choices. The challenge will always be, at which point do we corral you or Max to do a degree that we think is good for you, or do we allow you to make the choice? This is difficult. And it is very difficult. I think it's a matter of choice amongst parents. in our case here, your mom and I had actually a discussion about whether we tell you what we think is good for you and we get you to force
Do
you
you
to
think
do it.
that in hindsight I did what was good for me? If it was up to you, okay lah. Maybe we don't say in hindsight, because I think obviously then no matter what I've done, it sort of led me to
I don't think so.
ultimately the
if-
correct
to,
path.
To be very honest with you, I would have asked you to do something different. I wouldn't have asked you to do what you wanted to do. So did Max as well.
Okay.
And
So what would you have asked me to
I
to
probably
do?
would have asked you to do law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why law?
And partly the reason, because you're articulate.
Okay.
You are articulate and you have a personality, you can connect with people, you can connect the dots. In that sense, if you are not articulate, it's very difficult. And your mind is sharp and you can see the end points in the logic of an argument that people put forward. So I believe that you had the innate trait to become a good lawyer, and partly because I didn't become a lawyer as well. And it was quite natural for me to see, well, if I wanted Leon to, what would have been it? But
Right.
it was a deliberate thing on my part not to do it. And I look at your mom, and she also didn't want, we're not the type that corral you to do certain things that we wanted you to do, but we wanted you to make the choice of what is it you wanted to do. And so that's the same attitude that we took for your brother Max.
Well,
as
you could
well.
argue then, okay, I understand and I see the
Yeah.
point. But then in terms of then, okay, maybe perhaps I am not, I'm not within the fields of the vocation of a lawyer, but I think certainly the spirit then of, or the essence of a lawyer is still sort of present in the different disciplines that I'm in right now. In my case, then what I do is I then defend Christianity and I engage in apologetics to evangelize to people. So if you like, the people that I try to evangelize to are my jury. I'm trying to convince them of a compelling case for Christ. But it's also allowed me then to utilize my creative giftings, which is maybe something that I have maybe at times tried to run away from, but certainly something that is there, and I think will always be there. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting to hear that law, huh? That's the first time I hear this.
But having said that, Leon, if you ask me and your mom the question, sometimes we wonder, should we have really corral you to make a decision based on how strongly we felt about it, or allow you to empower you to do it? I still think today, empowering you to do, in your case, in your Max case, was the right thing to do. I don't have regrets about doing it. The reason why I said that is the following. One, because you and Max made the choices that you made. You own that journey because you made the volition to choose to take certain path. You then do the best you can with it. And that's a very important element, the ownership about that, the choice that you take for yourself. Very, very important. The second reason why I believe that it's the right thing to do it, we look at your personality and we see where you are today. And it's a journey, step by step along the way. And we are not so certain about what the next part of your journey is going to be. What I've seen so far is good to me.
Yep.
And so I'm very happy to see what has come out from you. Life is a huge adventure. And I do believe that you have to take your own time. You can chart your own course to do it. It's a bright future for you. I see the positives in aspects in your development as well as development in Max. Both of you are growing in your own separate ways. And I like the fact that you made the choices yourself.
We talk about vision and culture from a corporate standpoint, but now let's talk about it from a family standpoint. I think perhaps I think there are some cases where actually completely empowering one's kids could actually lead them to on a downwards trajectory. That I accept and I agree. But perhaps what is the, if you like, saving grace for Max and I is the fact that even if we have, let's say, just objectively speaking, even if I had made the wrong decision to go down the path that I had gone down, I think what's important is, first of all, that we have a family that believes in divine intervention and the fact that, you know, what essentially God calls us to do, as much as we try to run away from it, because that kind of legacy, that inheritance of, you know, living a spirit-filled or even a spirit-guided life is there already and innate within us. That will naturally allow us to course correct a little quicker and ultimately arrive at where where we think we are called. I mean, I'm using this language just in a spiritual sense, but for other people, it could be another thing. Maybe on a practical sense, it's just then what is the legacy that we leave behind in terms of character formation that will enable someone, even if they make the wrong decisions, to ultimately return and head on the right path. So I think legacy is important, and that's something that I try to inculcate in Ayla as well. Ultimately, she will also end up making her own decisions. But what Andrea and I try to be very intentional about is then, who's the type of person that we want her to be, regardless of what she does? Because if we work on the type of person, in our case, then I think Max and our upbringing has caused us to be very competitive. Sometimes it's I think in most cases it's a very good thing. Sometimes there's been some unhealthy competition as well. But I think that that competitive nature in us is the thing that has, I guess, prevented us from allowing maybe sometimes wrong decisions, not let that become something that pulls us down into mediocrity, because there's always this desire to want to play the game of the impossible. And so no matter where we are, because we want to do the impossible, it will eventually set us on the right track.
That point that you mentioned, if you took a particular choice, you made a decision there, and if you think it's not the right thing for you, there's always a time for you to course correct. Return back. There's no harm by saying, I took that, but I now want to take a second curve.
And you won't be able to course correct if you didn't have that character formation in you.
I agree.
To give you that desire to realize, hey, this is not right.
I mean, if you now connect that idea to the idea of a personality-driven organization, and I think the person that drives the organization must be able to see the curve that he or she is leading the organization in terms of performance. When it begins to reach a point that is going to start declining because of the personality, or they've exhausted the asset of that person that's involved, you then have to find someone else, some other people in the organization, to pivot and then pass it to what's called a second curve. There's a guy called Charles Handy. He wrote a book many years ago, and the book is called, he's got a couple of books. One is called The Second Curve, and the other one's called Empty Raincoat. And interestingly enough, Charles Handy used to work for Shell many, many years ago, and he spent 5 years actually in Borneo, in the downstream side of the business. He's a philosopher, a management guru, and he wrote this very simple article in the book. In chapter 1 in the book, he asked a stranger, he says, I'm going to this town, can you tell me the direction I'm going to that town? And the guy told him, very easy. You drive your car up to that hill. When you have driven up to that hill, reach the top of that hill, then you turn down, you come down that hill. On the right-hand side, you see a bar. They call it Davis Bar. Then you park your car there, you have a good beer at the bar. Now this idea but he said, by the way, to the town that you intend to have, it must be 2 kilometers away before you reach the hill, then you should have turned to the left.
Okay.
So this idea of a very simple idea of the Davis Bar is that the entrepreneur, the personality-driven organization, had led the organization up that curve, but when it starts to decline, because they've exhausted the asset of that person, the organization will go downhill, and then the performance will drop, and it starts to decline. That's the law of nature. And then you end up retiring at the Davis Bar. And now, if you now want to stop retiring at Davis Bar, what you then do is, you should have figured out the way. Drive back 2 kilometers back to where you are supposed to turn. Then you discover there was the road on the left. Then that's the second curve that you need to take. You start an entirely new journey. You can then, in this particular case, you can pivot and say, actually, I'm not the person that will bring this organization to a new curve. I then hand the baton to a next person who will then take them to this new, we call it the promised land, instead of retiring in Davis Bar. And if you do at the Davis Bar, you consign the organization towards a decline and a decay, and to a retirement and to a sunset. But if you then go back and pivot and start a new curve, that's called the second curve. And so that's the idea of how to then move into a second curve. In that sense, it's a very good analogy to say, how do you pivot away from an organization that's personality-driven to a professionally-driven organization.
Davies Bar. Davies Bar, perhaps a place I would like to go after the next meeting that I have to attend after this. So I think we should wrap up today's episode. I just want to say thank you to all of you for listening and for watching, following along on this father-son journey. We post episodes weekly every Friday at 6 a.m. So you can follow us on YouTube, on Spotify. We also post short-form content on Instagram as well as TikTok. We look forward to next week's episode. We'll see you then.